Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this 11:30 to 12:30 keynote session. Before we introduce Dr. T.C. Waisman, I just have 3 pieces of housekeeping for you. For those of you who are at the back, just around the door, could you please move in and take a seat just to clear access at the back of the room? While our keynote and any speaker is speaking, can we please avoid using the toilets at the back of the room because the door is banging and it is a little distracting. There are alternative ladies' toilets just outside, and a volunteer will direct you. For those of you who need a translation, please use the Wordly app, which is in the conference app. It is my pleasure now to introduce this morning's keynote, Dr. T.C. Waisman from Vancouver, Canada. And Dr. Waisman will be speaking about when research, policy, and practice become a beacon in a volatile world. Dr. Waisman will leave some time for questions after her presentation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. We haven't tested the mic. How does it sound? We're good? Ta, thank you. So thanks for coming to this talk that we're having right now on beacons in a volatile world, how research, policy, and practice have become beacons in a volatile world, and how it can become beacons in a volatile world. I had a conversation just before I started with some wonderful autistic researcher friends of mine, and was complaining a little bit about jet lag and feeling dysregulated, and they reminded me I could just own it and let you know that that's the state I'm in the moment, and we'll do our best and we'll get to the end together. So let's get started. Is it working? There we are. So I want to start first of all with what we call in Fiji, I'm from Fiji in the South Pacific, a talanoa. A talanoa is simply this, it's a storytelling. And I want to tell you about back in 2003 when I went home to Fiji and went to one of our family villages, you can see along this beautiful coastline right here. And I went there to the village to learn about leadership. My master's degree was on leadership and training, and I interviewed the leaders day after day and said, what is leadership? Is it a role? Is it something you're born with? Is it something that you've given? What is it? And we discussed it for many days, and I just wasn't getting an answer that I thought I really could relate to. And one of the leaders said to me, come and walk with me and let's have a talanoa. And you can tell by just the way that I've talked about that twice that it's a really big value system for us to have long talks. And he said to me, there used to be a gentleman here when he was a little boy. He still lives in the village, but he's an older gentleman now. When he was a little boy, he used to walk across the village green and climb up a tree, one of the trees you see here. And he would just watch the waves coming in and sets. That's all he did. He wasn't much of a talker, but he loved to watch the waves. And then one day at about 14 years old, he was walking across the green and went up again and was watching the waves, and he noticed something different in the pattern of the waves. He noticed that there was a rogue wave coming, and he watched it come, and then he realized this was very, very dangerous. Again, he wasn't much of a talker in the village, and what he did was he climbed down out of the tree and he ran into the village and he screamed, "Wave, run! Wave, run!" And everybody dropped what they were doing. They picked up their children, they picked up their neighbors' children, and they ran for higher ground. Now, this rogue wave hit this village, my cousin's village, and absolutely destroyed it. There was nothing left. But not one person died. And that leader told me, the thing about leadership in the village system is that if you do it right, if you create trusting relationships, and if you make sure that everybody feels like their voice is heard, then what happens is, when the need arises, the leader rises. So the leader can be a child, it can be an adult, it can be anybody. But if you do it right within this village system, then you create leaders who are willing to step up. And what you also create is a village who are willing to listen. Because if one person had stopped to ask questions, why are we running? How big is the wave? They would have died, and that was the reality. But there was a trusting relationship built into the village system. And so why am I telling you about a village system when we're talking about beacons in a volatile world in research and in policy and in practice? Here's the thing that I want to propose to you, is that if we can create village systems, then we can create ways to be able to mitigate the effects that volatility, that complexity, that ambiguity will have on not just us, not just our research, but also our organizations, also our families. So I want you to keep that in mind with the village system. I want to introduce you to my village. These are my kids and my siblings' kids. And I want you to notice something about the way that my village looks now. Now, by the way, my family we can trace our heritage back to the South Pacific from before the Fijian people were there. We were Lapita people. So we can trace ourselves back tens of thousands of years through my mom's line. And our village now looks like this. So we have Irish Fijians, Jewish Fijians, German Fijians, and Serbian Fijians, and Indigenous Canadian Fijians. And that's just in this one picture. We have many, many more in our family, and we're very, very lucky to have these wonderful relationships with our children and the people who married into our family as well, who bring their cultures in. But what I want you to notice is that there's a new complexity. There's a layer of complexity in our village, isn't there? So we're challenging ourselves by saying, how do we adapt as a Fijian culture? And how do we retain our culture and our language? And another layer on top of that is that we're also experiencing climate change. We're at sea level. So we are amongst the first people to lose our lands. We're amongst the first people to digitize our culture, because we know we're going to lose our lands. So there's this kind of a complexity, but that's also very beautiful, and that's going to come into play as we go on in our conversation. One thing I want to also leave you with is this is my Uncle Robert before we start in detail. My Uncle Robert is as Irish as the day is long. He just passed away a month ago, and he would have loved to know that as he was a part of my village for the 56 years that I've been alive, that here I am standing on what he would say the dirt of his land, talking to you. So this is an honor for me to be here, and especially for what we call him Uncle Bob of the Northern Irish O'Malleys. All right, so let's get into it. So what is a village system, and why is it a beacon of resilience? The village system, really, we're in a village system, we're both independent and interdependent. Now this sounds like this might be confusing, but let me explain. In a village system, we believe in independence, in autonomy. It's a democratic system. A village can be made up of 200 people, it can be made up of 2,000 people, but it's made up of individuals first. So the basic building block of a village is the individual. And that is also the basic building block of change within our village system as well, because when changes happen, they can change very rapidly, like we just talked about with the young man in the tree. One person can make a change for the better for everybody. But we're also interdependent. And you see in this picture here, we share meals, for example. We share resources, we share land. The ownership in a Fijian village, and in most South Pacific places like Tonga, Samoa, or Hawaii, it's the same thing. It's just that the land is, we're caretakers of the land. We don't own it, we caretake it. So we have that kind of interdependent feeling that exists today, that part of our culture. So it's very, very important. Also, one of the things I was thinking about this morning is how natural it is for us. If my family goes fishing and we catch fish, and your family goes fishing on the same day and they don't catch fish, it's irrelevant. We share the fish. It's just irrelevant. And I just realized today that that's actually an important part of who we are, that in Canada, I don't experience as much anymore, unless I'm a part of a village culture, the Fijian village culture there in the diaspora. Villages are also adaptable in terms of our decision making. So we have meetings. It's very much like a local governance system. So we can adapt very, very quickly. So something happens, a crisis is happening, we meet, and the way we meet isn't like, we just get together and we have conversations. There's ceremony around it. We bring a yangona bowl, we have a traditional ceremony. Each person speaks in a very low, respectful way. Everybody has a voice, and everybody's voice is extremely important. And so that's how we can make decisions very quickly. Sometimes it's not so quick, but we are adaptable in our decision making, and even though we have influences from the outside, we have governmental influences, climate influences, all of that, we make decisions for ourselves, and we adapt, and we make those decisions very, very quickly. We also believe that individuals are indispensable. So as we talked about with a young boy, you know, at that time when he was young, being somebody who could make a decision and, you know, and then everybody listened to him. Individuals are extremely indispensable, and what you bring, who you are, what you're born as in society in this moment in our culture is extremely important. We don't know how you're going to be giving to us and how we as a village are going to be giving to you, but we believe that you have a place and that your place is important. We also believe that differences are crucial to problem solving. So that young boy, and you might start to realize as I describe him, that perhaps he might have been autistic. I don't know, I wasn't diagnosed at the time when I went home, so I didn't see that, I wasn't looking for it. But here's a young man who barely spoke, he was pattern seeking, he was watching the ocean, and he was able to save the village's lives because he was pattern seeking. So the differences for us are absolutely crucial for problem solving. And the differences, as I showed you with our young children, that they bring from a Serbian experience, from a Jewish experience, from an Irish experience, is very, very crucial. We don't know how we're going to adapt as a culture in a volatile world in the future, but our children are willing to step in and start to think about ways that they can do that, and we're grateful for that. And clarity and accessibility for all is extremely important for us as well. In this picture of a typical village, you'll notice that all the houses, this is a very traditional village. They don't all look like this anymore. They look like houses. But you'll notice that there's sort of a rectangle in the middle, and then all the houses are on the outskirts. And the reason for that is because that's our communal area. That's where we do all of our ceremonies. That's where we play rugby. That's where we get together and do meccas, our dances. And there's no fences anywhere. Children come and go. They go to your house. They go to my house. That's the way it is. They, you know, they're hungry. They'll go to the closest place. But that's extremely important for us. And so when we have our meetings in those central areas. And our meetings, and I don't like the word meeting because it sounds like it's sort of, you know, an organizational development kind of way of describing it. But when we have our gathering, when we have to make decisions, it can take an hour when we do our ceremony, it can take a day, it can take a month, it can take a year. But what we're absolutely committed to is ensuring that every single person understands there's clarity around what the decision is, what the challenge is, and then eventually what the action is that we're going to take. And then we build in a little bit of slack so that, or, you know, in an organizational cultural world, we build in a feedback loop so that there's time, we take action, we stop, we reflect on it, then we take more action, we stop and reflect on that before we decide. The clarity is extremely important. Accessibility is important. If you're not understanding, if Auntie's not understanding why we're doing something that we're doing, and we've been meeting and meeting and meeting, then the elders will go to her house, and they'll keep explaining it to her and keep leaning into her and saying, what do you hear? What is it that you need from us? You know, maybe you're seeing something that we're not seeing. So clarity and accessibility is key. This is a Fijian proverb that I want to tell you, and it sounds really trite. It says, life is like this, sometimes sun, sometimes rain. But really what this is it's a statement of deep value for our culture. What happens is that every November, for example, we have hurricanes that come in and batter our lands and our houses, and we survive those, and we rebuild, and we adapt. Our adaptive skills are extremely strong in the South Pacific. You know, we've been at the mercy of the climate and the environment for thousands of years, so we know how to adapt. And so this statement that says life is like this, sometimes sun, sometimes rain, is a statement of adaptability. It's just saying it doesn't matter what's outside of our sphere of influence. That's nothing that we know, that's nothing that we can deal with. We can't change the hurricane. but we can change who we are and adapt. So we adapt very quickly. So it's a really important value statement for us. So we just talked about a little bit about the sun, which is my village experience, and now we're going to talk a little bit about the rain. For some of you who may not know what VUCA World means, this is an acronym that was started by two organizational professors, Bennis and Nannis, around 1985. It moved into the military world and was used in the military world, and now it's moved back into the organizational world. And it's simply an acronym that means that the world is volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, and it's ambiguous as well. And when they talked about it in 1985, they talked about it as 4 distinct categories of challenges with 4 distinct categories of solutions. But what's happening in today's world now? Well, we know that it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous all at the same time. It's like sets of waves hitting us over and over and over again. And we're talking about this kind of VUCA world, not just on a global scale, but also what's happening to the prices of eggs, what's happening in our families, what's happening with policies. So this is an important time for us to talk about a VUCA world when it comes to research policies and practice. I'm just going to break it down right now, and I'm going to explain it in 3 parts, each section. I'm going to explain it from a global perspective, and then I'm going to explain it from a research perspective, because that's the world that I come from and some of you come from, and then a policy perspective, also a world I come from because my doctoral degree is in leadership policy and governance. So when we're talking about volatility, we're talking about frequent, swift, and significant changes. These are the sets of waves that just keep hitting the beach. This is volatility. And what that means on a global scale is something like trade tariffs. That's just one example. We just don't know what's happening. The changes are happening so quickly. You know, trade tariffs a year ago was not even a conversation. They were written into the governmental agencies that were dealing with each other in different countries. And now all of a sudden we don't know what trade tariffs are doing, what percentage they're going to be, how it's going to affect us. It's hard to make sense of it all. In an uncertain world, from a global perspective, we're talking about loss of grants. We're talking about volatility from a research perspective. We're talking about loss of grants. So some of you out there I know have lost grants as a result of what's happening geopolitically. I've lost research grants as well. And we're being told, for example, that we can't use certain words in our research grant application, that those words are no longer viable, such as JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusivity. And because diversity is a word that's a keyword in there, near diversity also gets flagged as well. So that's the volatility that we're dealing with in research. Now in policy has changed quite a bit since even when I did my doctoral degree in 2017. Now universities are looking at doing a kind of MBA on policies because policy education has changed so much. We're now looking at, we need skills that are systems oriented, we need to be systems thinking. We also need to be able to think from an ethical standpoint that we haven't had to do before. Obviously we had to lean into ethics, but not more so than now. So policy education is changing because of the volatility of the world. Now, in an uncertain world, we're talking about unpredictable presence and future, and mainly this is about what's happening now. We can't make sense of what's happening now, so it's very, very hard to understand what's going to happen in the future. On a global scale, an example is global economic uncertainty. This is a reality that we're all going through at the moment, no matter what country you're from. And on a research scale, AI. A lot of us are dealing with the challenges of AI at our universities, and it's not regulated enough yet. We're playing catch up is what's happening. There are positive things to AI. Artificial intelligence is great if you're doing research and you've got a ton of interviews, and maybe you can use AI to transcribe, and instead of that taking months and months to transcribe the interviews, you can do that instantly, and so it only takes a couple of weeks because you do still have to go over and ensure that it's accurate. So AI has great uses in that sense. But there are ethical challenges, right? So how much AI can you use if you're using it to write or to edit your work? And in what fashion, and who regulates that? Also, we're finding that AI-written papers are actually lacking in integrity and creativity. So we all know that, when we're interpreting data, for example, we're interpreting data, but we're putting it into context because we're humans. We tell stories. Data is really just a talanoa, waiting to be interpreted. So just a story waiting to be told. And if you're not telling it from a human perspective, you're missing the context of it. And so there's a real danger with AI, missing the context and then interpreting it in a way that there's no integrity to it for sure, but there's also no creativity. AI also, they can lean into an already pre-existing racial bias, for example. There can be algorithm biases that get picked up. So, for example, in early autism research, mainly the types of people who were studied were cisgendered white males. You wouldn't have seen me in a study. I certainly didn't see me in a study. A lot of us were misdiagnosed, late diagnosed, or undiagnosed autistic. So we didn't show up in those early research studies. And so if AI is leading into the early research study, they're going to miss a whole context of people who are now part of the research that we're developing now for those of us who are activists in the autism research community. So there's a lot of dangers with AI in research. There's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know where we're going to be going with this. When it comes to policies, now we're talking about values not just being lip service. I'm sure that some of you have heard what's been happening at universities in the United States. Even though I'm from Canada, it affects us as well, where universities said, we believe in justice, equity, diversity, and inclusivity. We believe in this. We want to support this. This is wonderful. And then something happens geopolitically, and then they drop those value systems. So value systems now, when it comes to uncertainty, have to be in policy. They've got to be able to be something that sticks. You've got to really value it. Otherwise, it just becomes lip service, and then people start to make up their minds about the kind of university you are and whether or not you really meant it when you said that you believe in inclusivity. Now, let's look at complexity. Now, in the global scale, climate crisis is just one example, right? It's complex. How am I going to explain to my auntie who's never, ever even seen a car, who lives on a small island in Fiji, what the climate crisis is, why the waters are rising, why she's losing her land? It's very difficult. These are interconnected issues with our culture as well. We're telling stories about it, and we're integrating the stories into our ceremonies, but the cause and effect is really unclear. So it's very, very difficult to, and that's just one example, and that's just one small example in our village. The climate crisis is very complex even on a large scale. Who's responsible? Why aren't governments doing more? If we're doing things as individuals, what about the toxins that are leaching out from companies, that kind of thing. So these conversations are very complex. When it comes to research, the diagnosis conversation is complex. I know a lot of researchers in the room, they're very good friends, and we've had this conversation. So when we decide that we're going to do research with autistic folks like ourselves, do we include just people who are diagnosed formally, or do we include people who are also undiagnosed but self-diagnosed? And now the challenge is, how do we regulate that? And do we just trust what they say is true? But the problem is, if we don't include voices of those people who are undiagnosed, then we may fall into the challenge of not including people like myself. I was diagnosed in 2017 at 48 years old, and I'm 56 now, so I've only been diagnosed for a very short time. But what about our voices? What about those who've been racialized and minoritized and not having been even in the research papers? So if you don't include those who are self-diagnosed, then what? Are we also creating more bias? So there's a lot of challenges around that, and how do we do it? When it comes to policies, the instability right now with the complexity of the world, how are we writing policies if we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow? How are we writing policies that the CEO doesn't even believe in the things that we're starting to say that we value as an organization? We see this in the fashion industry, we see this in universities, we see this in organizations within our cities. So it's just, the stability of it is so difficult that policies themselves are a question. And ambiguity. When it comes to the big world, mass media. I mean, we've heard it already this morning. There's misinformation and disinformation. What do you believe? Where are you getting your information from? Where are the young people getting their information from? You know, they're not watching the news, they're not watching, and if you watch the news, can you even believe that anymore? So it's so ambiguous. There's a lack of clarity about the meaning of events and what that's going to mean in the future, especially for those of us who are older, who are going to be watching what the young people are doing. What does it mean in research? Well, we can't really plan long-term anymore. This is a really difficult thing when we have a lack of clarity about the meaning now. Those of us who've lost grants, now what? How do we shift? How do we adapt? And when it comes to policies, we have incomplete data, right? It's incomplete. We want to be able to create policies or redesign policies so that they fit the thing that we're wanting to do. We want better outcomes for autistic students in the younger grades. Wonderful. And now we're talking about the ambiguity between parents, what parents believe and what the education system believes, what the governmental agencies believe, and what we say that we stand for. We've got to dig down deeper. Where there's ambiguity, we've got to be clear. We've got to really dig down and chunk it down, and we'll talk about that in a minute as well. So that's a VUCA world from those perspectives. But what do we do in order to be able to, counteract the experiences that we're having? Because to me, a VUCA world is sort of up here. It's happening. It's bombarding us all the time. Well, I assert that we can create resilient villages and that that's possible. And I don't want you to just take my word for it. I want to look a little bit at some lessons that we can learn from the Indigenous activism world, universal design, from a few of the rights movements and participatory action, which is what we do in some research. And I want to start by saying this was credited to Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. So as I said in the beginning, one individual, like that boy in the tree, one individual is the basic building block of a village. And then when more are gathered, we can become resilient villages. And we're going to talk about that. So let's look at the lessons from Indigenous activism. This is a whistle-stop tour. We don't have a lot of time together. I've only got a few more slides, so I'm just going to do a whistle-stop tour. I write with other Indigenous researchers. We just published a paper on Indigenous perspectives of autism research. We're publishing another paper probably this week on Indigenous methodologies in autism research, and we're going to keep writing about that. And what we found is we're from all over the world, different places, different Indigenous groups. One of the things that we have in common is our idea, our value for interdependence. We believe in interdependence. We're not only interdependent with each other, with our family units, with our village, but also with our land, with our air, with our community, and with our resources. So that's an interesting lesson, and that's something that I already talked about with my village. I'm going to give you a little bit of a perspective from a North American labor perspective, because that's my context. In 1925, there was a gentleman named A. Philip Randolph was his name. He was a black man, and he led a movement, a labor movement, to unionize, I think it was called the Brotherhood of the Sleeping Porters. So they were the porters in the train that ran across the Americas that people would sleep on overnight or more or longer. And so they were the porters who took care of them. And he started the union, he fought for the union. It was a black-led movement, and so many of the porters were black, and it was a hit, and they became the first union, and that was in 1925. So A. Philip Randolph then went on 30, 40 years later in the 1950s and 60s to become part of the civil rights movement, the black rights movement, and also the labor movement that moved on from there to become the Walk on Washington, I think that was what it was called, the Walk on Washington, 1963. And that's where they were fighting for jobs and freedom. And so what they were showing was that there's a real intersectionality between racial justice and economic justice. And so things were starting to come together, the rights, the civil rights movement, the labor rights movement, and also the movement for better work pay and for better safety in their workplaces. They were coming together. And then the disability rights movement in the Americas started as a result of the World Wars. They happened, and then all of a sudden soldiers came home and they were disabled. They were psychologically disabled, they were physically disabled. So it was no longer out there, it was in your home. Somebody in your home was now physically disabled. And so the disability rights movement began, and laws were changed, and curb cuts were put into footpaths, and ramps were created into buildings. And then we had elevators in every single building, and braille, and little dings so that you could hear it. And that all happened as these movements started to grow on each other. And these movements informed each other. So they were all peaceful movements for the most part. There was a pattern to the movement. And the one value system across all of them, there are many values, but one that stuck out for me is that every individual is indispensable. That should you go and work in a mine, you have the right to come home at the end of the day. You are indispensable. You are a father, you are a brother, you are somebody's loved one. You are indispensable. And in participatory action, those of us in research understand it as community-based participatory action, participatory research, sorry, that's a mouthful, CBPR. Simply put, it's research that is nothing about us without us. There's nothing that can happen in research that shouldn't include us. We shouldn't be invited. We should be at the decision-making table. From the second that you decide what your research question is, to the formal product that you're done, that you have at the end of your research, we should be all along the way. I can't imagine, as a woman who's as intersectional as I am, I'm Black, I'm Fijian, I'm also South Asian and Asian. I can't imagine somebody doing research on any one of my intersectionalities and not including us in that research. How valid is that? So participatory action says nothing about us without us, and we can be adaptable because we have to be. We've already proven we're adaptable as autistics, are we not? We've lived our lives as autistics, and some of us with ADHD and other things as well. I won't go into my whole list, but anyway. So we're adaptable people anyway, and what I find is when I, as an autistic person, am doing research with people who are non-autistic, that I'm actually much more adaptable than non-autistics, and that's a strange thing because we're told the opposite, aren't we, sometimes? So participatory action, nothing about us without us, include us from the beginning. Don't invite us. Universal design, this is a lesson from universal design. Universal design was created as a result of the disability rights movement when the laws changed and they said you need to build buildings that are accessible. They meant physically accessible. And so all of a sudden architecture had to change. Not just the architecture of buildings, but the design of the environments, the design of the outdoor spaces. And that's now moved into things like UDL, Universal Design for Learning. There are 7 basic principles, you can look it up, very, very basic principles that can be used, and what it's all about is clarity and access for the most amount of people. Because like a rising tide lifts all boats, if you design for those with the most needs, then everybody benefits, and we've already heard that this morning. So universal design, again, clarity and access is everyone's right. And again, these lessons are the same lessons that I'm trying to talk about when I'm talking about our villages. Here's an interesting that's happening right now. What we're finding in the Americas is that there are many challenges. Like I said, it's a VUCA world. There are many challenges that are happening right now. But also what's happening is that there's this hub, this thing, this magic that's happening inside of the challenges, and it's happening very, very quickly, and it's profound, and it's revolutionary. Let me give you an example. In Los Angeles, there were a lot of immigration officers who were taking away people who were immigrants, often for no reason whatsoever. I mean, there is no reason. for the way that they're doing things in the Americas at this moment, and that's probably going to get me in trouble, but there it is. And what they're doing in LA was that people were coming out in droves and protecting the immigrants and that were being taken out of their education systems, their schools, their farms, their homes, and they were lining up and trying to assert their right with their bodies to protect these people so that they weren't being taken away. And they would text each other, they would live stream it on TikTok, they would announce it on Reddit, and so it was immediate. It would go out, and then all of a sudden one person, again, the individual is the basic building block of a resilient village, one person became a leader, they took a stand, they stood there with their bodies, they texted it out, and then 10 people, 20 people, 100 people would gather. And then all of a sudden there were, what's it called now? There was censorship on the algorithm, so algorithm censorship. That was happening, and so you'd use certain words, and then it would be censored immediately. And the very lovely young people in LA, who I love the generations that come after our generation, Generation X, I think the world of them, they did something spectacular. They decided to call it the LA Music Festival. And so they would tweet that out, or they would put that on Instagram immediately or on TikTok and say, LA Music Festival on the corner of this street and this street. And it turned from 1 or 2 people to hundreds of people immediately coming. And what were they doing? They were creating what I call lightning villages. They came together, and one person became a village, and they started to show up as leaders. 2 minutes before, these people didn't know each other. They were going about their daily lives. They did not know they were going to be heroes that day. They showed up. I get very emotional about it because it's stunning to watch. In the hundreds immediately, and created these resilient villages that were interdependent, that were able to make decisions immediately. Something was happening here, everybody would come together there. A leader would say something here. Again, they didn't know each other. So these resilient villages, these lightning villages, did not need to be taught what to do. They knew it. They innately knew it. And that's what I'm saying. In a VUCA world, we have that power. We have that resilience and that ability. And what's really interesting to me and why I call it one work is because the kinds of people who are coming out to fight for the rights of immigrants are not just fighting for the rights of immigrants. They're fighting for trans rights, because they're losing their healthcare system. They're fighting for disability rights because they are losing Medicaid and Medicare. They're environmentalists fighting for their rights. They're all fighting for different things, but it's become one work. So as VUCA has become one large entity that seems overwhelming, so has the resistance. And so the resistance is becoming stronger and stronger from within. So how do we take a village approach in research, in policy, and practice? These are some of the challenges and opportunities. I don't want to make this simplistic, but this is some of the conversations that I've been having lately. In research, I've heard that it's too complex, there are too many external forces, what are we going to do? Well, you got to leverage momentum, right? Just like all of those rights movements are coming together and these children are coming together and fighting and creating lightning villages. You've got to use the momentum from other activists. You've got to be able to move around. For example, I worked with, there's Dr. Christy Patton in the room, and I did something with Sensodyne. Sensodyne created a sensitivity initiative. We've worked on it for 2 years, and we rolled that out in New York. That's not research, but guess what? We're still activists. We're still moving the front line forward. Dr. Dina Gassner and I worked on a review board where we were responsible for deciding who gets research money for autism research. Again, we weren't doing the research, but we were putting ourselves on the front line and moving the activism forward and working with other people. I worked with Dr. Rachel Harmon on human trafficking, autism and human trafficking. There are many, many areas. So activism doesn't just look like doing great research and what you do and getting good at it. It looks like cross-pollination. It looks like creating lightning villages. In policies, I hear it's too established, it's too integrated. Things are not going to change. Well, you got to break it down. Policies can be broken down into small chunks. And it has to be leader first. I think it was the author, Malcolm Gladwell, who said, if you want change to stick, you've got to make it sticky. If you want change to stick, you've got to make it sticky. If a leader believes in the change, and he or she loves it, breathes it, talks about it, at every meeting, every time you walk down the hall, that person is talking about that kind of a change, it's going to stick in the culture, on the walls, on the carpet. It's going to stick in a way that other people use it. It becomes the norm, the language. That's what that kind of activism looks like. Policies can change. Practices, it's too ingrained in the culture. I'm sure most of us, or some of us here in the room are old enough to remember that they used to smoke in airplanes. You know, there was a smoking and non-smoking section, which is a joke because it's all the same air in a plane. They used to smoke in all the pubs, and everybody said, there's no way it's going to change. No one's going to go for that. But after time, through the activism of people, individuals, and also in collectives, that too was changed. And those were big changes when we remember it. So you've got to start where you are with policies and practices. Start exactly where you are in small chunks. Make sure that you have buy-in from the top down, and it's not just grassroots people who are doing all the work up. I also want to remind you that we're also already doing this in our own ways. We're making adaptable decisions. We're here today, all of us together. We've made the decision to come together, to learn together, to bring our skills together and our lived experiences. We're doing it. We understand that differences are crucial, or we wouldn't be here. We understand that there's value to autistic people. We understand that there's value to every single one of us, and that every single one of us is an individual who can create change. We're also interdependent. By the time we leave our 3 days together, we will have created networks. We will have created ways that we can cross-pollinate with ideas, with actions, and that's exactly what makes a lightning village. And we're creating clarity and access. Everybody who spoke up here today, and everybody who's going to speak, when you hear them in the breakout sessions and in the big rooms and in the small rooms, every single thing we're doing is to try and create more clarity, more access. Are we clear about the values that we have? Are we clear about where we want to go and the outcomes that we want? Not just as autistics and autistic families, autistic family members and organizations, but we're creating clarity for the world as well to understand us more. And here's where I want to leave you. I want to leave you with my research village. These are just some of the people in my research village who I have the pleasure of working with, and some of them are in the audience here today. And feel free to talk to me about them because I love them all. But these are the people who I cross-pollinate with. We don't do the same kind of research and autism research, but we cross-pollinate whenever we can. And then if you don't get a grant, guess what? I'm going to invite you in to write with me here. Let's keep moving this forward. Let's keep being activists together on the ground. Let's keep finding ways to create lightning villages together. And one of the most important things that I want you to know and what I want you to walk away with is that you are our beacons of hope. The work that you do. We read the stories, we read the headlines, we hear about the small stories and the large stories. You know, the fight that you have with your education system, the fight that you're having with an organization in order for you to be able to change just one thing. And it means something to us. It gives us hope, and it gives us the ability to keep going. So you are our lightning village, and we take our cues from you because the outcomes that we want for our community come from the community, not from the research that we think we should do. It actually comes from you. So that's my talk, and I thank you so much for the time that you've taken today. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Dr. Waisman, for that wonderful talk. We do have some time for questions, and I'm going to start with a question of my own.
Sorry.
TC, I believe that co-production is a journey and not a destination. So how do we become, where is the next step in our journey on co-production?
So can you tell me more about co-production? Do you mean in research?
Yes, co-production in research and also in the development of materials, educational materials and training. So how can we enhance our co-production journey?
So the number one thing, and I think most people here might agree, and if you don't, I'd love to hear from you, is that when we're co-producing in research, the most important part is to make sure that the voice that we're co-producing with is not necessarily the voices of the academics. It's the people on the ground. It's the autistic people who are in our community who need a voice in academia. So we're just centralizing that voice and making sure that we're centering those voices rather than making our voices the center. And I know that other researchers up here have opinions, and I don't know where Dr. Dina Gassner is, but I'd love her to step up to them. There she is. She's got a thing or two to say about this, I'm sure. Do you want to say something, Dina? Okay, but do you want to say something before the question is over about the... Okay, all right. Did that answer your question?
Yes,
okay.
Thank you, but I'm looking forward to hearing from your colleague. And we'll have a question here at the front, please.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Moish.
Oh, sorry.
Could you speak up a little, please? And
feel free to leave, but we just want to be a little quieter because I just can't hear him.
Yeah.
Just want to honor him. Go ahead.
My name is Moish. I'm a dad for 2 boys that are non-speaking. And I'm representing them over here because the scientific committee of this organization didn't want to hear them. 80% of people on the spectrum don't have voice. There is one thing that is not changed, and this is the stigma of autism. The stigma of autism is driven by the academia and by the science of autism. And when I see that Autism Europe is being driven by a scientific committee, that means that the stigma is going to stay there forever. If we want to change something, we have to take the science, the autism science, away. This science is a cancer. And it needs to be taken away and replaced by innovation and by social entrepreneurs that will stand over here. You live in a village. Your village is academia. My village is autism. I live with this 24/7 for the last 30 years, and there are 40 million like me that has better life in the US. So if you complain about the grant that you lost, I'm complaining about the fact that you're taking the voice of my kids. And I complain about the fact that you, at the age of 46, call yourself a neurodivergent, which is not a medical term, it's a subjective term. And by that, you're pushing my voice to be on the last priorities of society again.
I respect your perspective.
Thank you very much for that. I think, as I have said initially at the start of the Q&A, we are all on a journey, and that journey is both individual and scientific. Another question then from the floor. Thank you.
This is going to sound like a mutual admiration society here, but I just wanted to take a minute to thank you. I know in working with you that both of us as autistic researchers aspire to maximize the most oppressed voices in our community. And I think to pretend that we can do research without considering policy, and that we could do research and not be able to separate politics from policy is a really important transformation that we have to start making, especially since so much of the research we do results in people being diagnosed, results in access where there are diagnostic deserts, where people's lives are altered because they get access to information on how to better understand and translate between the worlds. And I'm grateful for your bravery and your confidence, and that you were able to use your intersectional identities to help us see that we're all just in this together. So thank you, TC.
Thanks, Dina.
Thank you very much. Please move forward and ask your question. Thank you.
Hi, it was a great presentation. It was a great presentation. I just want to ask that your diagnosis was made at the age of 47, right?
48, yeah.
48.
Yeah.
So if you think back, so if your diagnosis was made at a younger age, what things would you have done better? Or after the diagnosis, what changes do you feel? And then you said that, okay, I'm going to be advocate for this.
Yeah, so she's asking if I had been diagnosed when I was younger, what things could I have done better? What changes do I think I would have experienced? The number one thing for me is that for a long time as a young person, I had suicidal ideations. And that was really difficult because I didn't understand myself. So the one major change for me would have been that I would have been able to understand who I was in the context of my family, in the context of my school, and not just felt like I was left out. So for 48 years, I felt like there was something really deeply wrong with me, that I wasn't being able to fit in. And then after that, it took years for me to forgive myself, and then to learn what it meant to be who I am, and then to unmask, and then to fully understand. And it's going to take a lifetime. But that would have helped a lot had I learned who I was when I was younger. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question?
Hi. I just want to say, based on my understanding and my diagnosis last year, that the research has been fundamental to me understanding myself, and as well the suicidal ideations that go with lack of diagnosis in a system where we're not supported is hugely impactful, and I do think that finding the right words makes a difference.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you in terms of the academic space and it coming to research, obviously there's a limitation on how it can be presented, that information. Yeah. Given that that's not necessarily an inclusive practice, do you think that there would be any space in the academic sphere to explore actually changing our approach to academic literature and maybe including oral presentation as equally as valid to written, because peer review doesn't stop at written word?
Yeah, so if I understood your question correctly, is there room for, and will there be changes in the academic world in terms of autism research, and is there room for other things like oral presentations, not just written presentations?
I think it goes beyond just the autistic research. Okay. It's research in general, the ability for a person who doesn't have or doesn't necessarily find their strengths in a traditional written capacity, whether that be because they're autistic or for another reason. Would inclusive practices not be improved by opening up the academic arena to various ways to present information?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm an atypical researcher. I only went back and did my doctoral degree at 48, and I found out a month before that I was autistic, and then switched over to learn about autism because I had no idea what that was. And so academia is not easy for me at all. And I keep saying I'm quitting research. I'm going to quit. But I think that there has to be room. It should not be for, and it isn't really anymore. And in autism research, those of us who are activists are fighting for the idea that research can be conducive to working with and also privileging other voices, as lived experience has an absolute power, if not more power. And we have the ability to do something and write something in a certain way, but also if the knowledge product at the end of the day doesn't uplift the community, then what is it really for? And from an Indigenous perspective, if I'm doing research on my Fijian people, my Islander people, and the knowledge product isn't going to uplift them, and they can't translate it, and they can't then get work from it, or they can't use it in some way that highlights their skills, then I'm not doing what I need to do for my community. And my community would consider that, my village would consider that usury.
Absolutely, like academic writing in itself can actually be ableist in terms of limiting the amount of people accessing the information. Thank you.
Right, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, one more question, please. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear? Can you hear me?
Oh, where? Sorry, where are you?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. I just can't see you. I don't know where you are. Oh, Todd. Yeah. Thank you.
So I think so. My name is It's just pardon the reverb. My name is Adrian Carroll. I work for SIM as Senior Policy Officer. So I just would like to ask a question that maybe has two dimensions. So I think one of the things that's really, I kind of find really interesting about your talk was kind of talking about like how you're able to kind of interweave your own kind of personal background into your academic research. So I think I would like to ask kind of two questions on this. How do you kind of see your work kind of informing? Can you hear me better?
Yeah, sorry, I'm having trouble, sorry. If you can hear him.
Could you just say your first question again there, please?
Yeah. So my first, I suppose my first question would be, my first question would be how do you kind of find your own personal experience in terms of how does that kind of align with kind of like the day-to-day work of like influencing kind of like public policy more I suppose like kind of more generally, and kind of working with kind of like the machinery of government and civil service and sort of like and sort of like the machinery of government, but also sorry, I also kind of think what would be your kind of perspectives in terms of kind of learning from your own kind of background and your professional experience that you would like us to kind of take away as people who kind of work in this space, and in terms of how we go to engage with autistic people, and particularly for people who might be working with marginalized communities, that we would like to learn more from their experiences, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I think I'll start with the second question, but did you hear all of it?
I think the two questions are, the first one is, how does your personal experience impact on your interaction with policymakers? And the second question then is really, with your own unique experience, what would your key take-home be for everyone here today?
Wow, that's a lot. I don't know how to answer that, actually. I think those are really wonderful questions, and that would take me a little time to think. Would it be possible to talk to you about that a little bit after? Because I just need a little time with that. Oh, perfect. Yes. Okay.
Okay, so there's going to be a lovely conversation take place at some stage today.
Great questions.
And we will have one quick final question from the floor. Thank you for your patience. Sorry, that's it. Go on ahead.
So, TC, firstly, thank you, because that was wonderful, and you very much are a beacon of hope. I just wanted to ask you about, within that village, supporting so many leaders, which I think is so important, how do we make sure that leaders are taken care of and make sure that that self-care and support within that community is there? So anything you think would be helpful.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And so for me, again, when it comes down to it, leadership is not just one person, and it's not just the role. It's the way that the leaders also create leaders amongst others within the group, whatever organization or university. And so taking care of the leader really also means taking care of each other. And it means about making sure that, again, when the need arises, the leader rises, right? And so we're taking care of the leader because we want that leader to succeed in the same way that the leader wants us to succeed, or leaders want us to succeed, hopefully, and be the leaders that rise when the occasion calls for it, if that makes sense.
Okay, unfortunately we'll end the Q&A there, but I'm sure TC would be happy to speak to people and answer questions once the session is complete. It just is up to me now to say thank you so much to Dr. T.C. Waisman for this wonderful presentation, and enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you.
Bye.